right, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm happy to present the Tri-Institutional Translational and Clinical Research Pilot Program. This is a pre-submission webinar, and thrilled to do this on behalf of my colleagues. Next slide. Now, the pilot program is really in two tranches of money. One is translational science, and that competition was held about a month ago, and the awardees have been designated. The one we'll be talking about now is specifically towards translational research. Now, this program is part of Elements and Modules, the New Jersey Alliance for Clinical and Translational Science, NJX. The pilot studies are part of the modules, and they're headed up by Arnold Rabson, Grace Wang, Sam Wang, and Joe Yeager from the health system. Grace Wang is from NJIT, and Sam Wang is from Princeton. And Arnold, of course, is from Rutgers. Now, the whole goal here is to promote discovery into translation to patients and then on to policy. And the goal is to take our remarkably successful translational research program over the past 5 years and to continue that in this realm. This is different than translational science, which I'll highlight. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, the program administrative staff is shown here. These are predominantly staff at Rutgers, Bill Jester, Sandy Burrows, Judy Argon, Pam Dalen, as well as Anthony Gonzalez, and Bianca Frida is our representative at Princeton. These are the people who will be responding to your email queries to give you an idea of what's next steps and how to compete for this RFA. Next slide. Now, the Tri-Institutional Clinical Translational Research Program, we acknowledge that each institution has kicked in about $100,000, except NJIT, which is committed $50,000. So Rutgers is $100,000, Princeton at $100,000, NJIT at $50,000. We're optimistic that we will get other support from industry down the road, but right now that's what we have for this particular competition. Next slide. Now, the aims of the pilot program, simply put, is to enhance, broaden, bolster research endeavors in translational research. Again, translational research is taking a discovery and moving it through the pipeline to get it into patients as well as into changing policy. We want to propel clinical and translational research initiatives across our institutions and provide financial support to nurture projects. Now, how are we going to know we're doing well? What's the impact of this program? Well, the impact is ultimately going to lead to pilot funding that will secure R21, R01 funding, or multiple collaborations. That's going to be the metric of success here, ladies and gentlemen. We're really asking for you to help spearhead and catalyze your science to build collaborations so you can develop independent projects. Next slide. So what is translational research versus translational science? Well, it's translating discoveries from the lab to bedside to populations. And this diagram really summarizes sort of the concept about translational research. What we really want to do is touch every domain, the basic research, but with the patient-centric approach in improving outcomes. So the research you're performing should be hypothesis testing, not hypothesis generating. And it's different than translational science, which is the study of process. In other words, if I was going to do translational science research, I'd be looking at the benefit of pathway A versus pathway B in getting dissemination implementation science done. Here, we're really talking about hypothesis testing, which could be wet or dry laboratory testing, but it's often based on an organ system or disease that will leverage new discoveries into practice and policy. Next slide. So what is translational research? Well, research is a continuum. Translational research is a continuum. It can start at the bench, could be wet lab or dry lab. It takes new approaches and transfers of applying discoveries from basic science, demonstrate its usefulness through clinical trials and studies. Of course, the amount of money that we're giving here cannot possibly be adequate to fund a clinical trial. However, one could, for example, utilize human specimens, tissues, cells to characterize a mechanism of action or to address a specific hypothesis. We need to disseminate the findings to enhance best practices in the community and to impact policy to improve human health. When we think about translational research, we use monikers like T0. That's bench wet lab research. T1 is first in humans. T2 is proof of concept. T3 is now testing in populations. T4 is changing policy. Now, in that continuum, you could devise testing a hypothesis from T0 to T1, T1 to 2, and so forth. So hopefully that gives you a flavor of what translational research is about. It is often tied to the use of human cells and human tissue. Now, do we exclude murine models? Of course not. But we recognize murine models are often imperfect in the translation to human disease. So we encourage, with this RFA, the use of human cells, human tissue. It could be non-human subjects research using de-identified tissue and cells. Optimally, we want to get closer to the patient so that your discoveries can translate into new approaches, devices, or therapy. Next slide. Some important notes. All pilot proposals must demonstrate a clinical relevance. So make sure that you include that in your proposal. The number of awards are flexible depending on the number and quality of proposals, and collaboration of institutions is encouraged but not required. That's different from our previous pilot programs where we compelled people to have collaborators in one of the alliance institutions. Remember, the alliance partners are Rutgers, NJIT, Princeton, and the health system. So collaborations are encouraged, but not required. Next slide. What kinds of applications? Well, there's several categories or flavors. One is the clinical and translational research project, anywhere along the entire range of translational research continuum from T0 to T4. I just described this. They can be lab-based clinical health services, epidemiology, community engagement, and diversity research. Projects have focused on novel aspects of the heterogeneity of disease and response to therapy is encouraged. That's because our theme of NJAX is focused on understanding and addressing the heterogeneity of disease and the response to therapy. There's another category, propel projects. These are high risk, high reward, catalyze scientific discovery by supporting proposals to explore novel ideas, adding new technologies or research methods to a project, or enable clinical data acquisition, the purchase of small equipment or licenses to data sets that will then be used to test a hypothesis. Now, remember, our center here, the Rutgers Institute for Translational Medicine and Science, as well as NJX, is disease agnostic. So any disease is reasonable to study. We like those to be examples and exemplars of how somebody could move a similar project in a different disease state. So sort of generalizability is important. Next slide. Valued partner projects are also interesting. They support team science and build liaisons with key partners in industry, government, nonprofits, other CTSAs, and insurance companies. What we like to see with a valued partner project is that we leverage institutional support with partner in-kind services or funding. Proposals must include a detailed description of the in-kind support and a letter of support from the partner organization. This is one category. It's not exclusive. As I mentioned, there are several other categories, but it's certainly an opportunity if you have a valued partner to engage. Next slide. The budget and project length. Proposals from Princeton and Rutgers may request between 50 and 100K. NJIT proposal may request 50K. Collaborative proposals may request no more than 50K. 100K, pardon me. So just to reiterate, they could range at Princeton and Rutgers from 50 to 100K per proposal. NJIT is limited to 50K, and collaborative proposals between institutions may request no more than 100K. Awarded budget may be reduced based on the number of highly meritorious proposals. The duration is 12 months. Start and end date will be clearly defined shortly. We'll cover that. Depends on the regulatory review and approval requirement. For example, if you need an IRB or not, or if you need an IACUC, these things are critical to the success of the program. And one no-cost extension will be allowed with sufficient justification. Next slide. PI and co-PI eligibility. Must be well suited to manage a project. Can devote sufficient effort to complete the proposed aims, appropriate experience and training to lead the project, demonstrated on ongoing record of accomplishments in the field. If the project is collaborative or multi-PD, PI, the investigator should have complementary and integrated expertise. The PI must have a primary affiliation with a sponsoring institution, Rutgers, Princeton, NJIT, hold a faculty or equivalent position. Barnabas Health investigators can serve as co-Is, and postdoctoral fellows, residents, and clinical fellows may also serve as co-Is, provided their mentors are from one of the sponsoring institutions. This is different. This is different than 5 years ago. Fellows and postdoctoral fellows can be co-Is, but they do need to have a mentor. Would be mentored sponsored research. PIs and co-Is are limited to one application per cycle. Sole exception is clinicians who have a specific expertise or patient populations that are relevant, could be relevant to more than one proposal. Eligibility for this exception should be clearly described in both the letter of intent and the application. So how do I apply? Next slide. Well, let the games begin. The application project, the process. We need a letter of intent. That's required. Must have a letter of intent. You can't get through the threshold or gateway to the full application without it. That's due November 4th. Not a lot of time. We recognize that by midnight, November 4th. The LOI form is available on the website. I'll give you a moment. You can take a photo of that. This slide set will be up also on our website. The red cap form titled Co-PIs, Draft Abstract, Draft Aims is part of the LOI. The purpose is to ensure a match between the RFA and the project, the responsiveness to the translational science, to translational research, not translational science, assess competitiveness, and allow leaders to start matching reviewers to projects. Institutional sign-off is not required for the letter of intent. Notification will be in 4 days, November 8th, if deemed eligible. And applicants receives a link to begin the application process. So next steps, if you're interested, is a brief LOI, the abstract, the draft specific aims, the COIs. Next slide. The specific form is a red cap link is sent to each applicant. The abstract is up to half a page, specific aims half a page. The research strategy is up to 5 pages, background data 2, and research plan 3. This is a very truncated application. We recognize this is not a lot of time, but we have the opportunity to get this off the ground in the first year here as we got renewed for 7 years. How will the project lead to independent funding is up to a 1-page project timeline by month, up to 1 page. That's for those who get invited for the full application after the LOI. Next slide. Need a reference section, other support information for COIs. This will all be specified. Detailed budget, NIH bio sketch for co-PIs and key personnel, and a letter of support, if necessary. Next slide. The review process. Our application review process will hopefully be initiated and completed by December 13th. At 5 p.m. The levels of review is there's administrative review to make sure that the applicant is qualified. The initial review will draw reviewers from the Academy of Mentors, previous pilot awardees, and prominent scientists in the field. Most will be coming from the 3 partner institutions. The review by the primary review committee will be completed. A final review and funding decisions will be made by the executive committee of the COIs, myself as program director, and the alliance partners. Next slide. Our criteria for review is impact, the use of NJAX resources. Very important. When you do your write-ups or your letter of intent, please indicate which cores and modules or elements you're going to be using of NJAX. The more you use these cores, the more competitive your application will be. Collaboration building is important. Potential to generate reproducible findings and high quality, excellence of the science, potential for translation, likelihood of success in the use of RWJBH data, facilities, and patients will require an RWJBH sign-off eventually, and also the potential for publications, NIH funding, and adaptation of outcomes by our health system. So these are what the reviewers are going to be looking for. So again, in your application, speak to the review criteria. In that way, you'll align your project, your hypothesis, with outcomes that will be viewed favorably. Next slide. So in a nutshell, due December 13th is the formal application. That's all highlighted here. So again, we will review these through the holidays to turn them around quickly. The full application due December 13th. The pages are there, as you can see. The scientific strategy, which is really the cornerstone of this application, 6 pages. So view it more or less like an R21, which those out there in the audience, I'm sure you're familiar with. Next slide. Institutional sign-off. For the letter of intent, not required. For the application, that depends on your institutional requirements. The funding of each of these are going to be coming from the institution that have provided the resources. So the Rutgers folk will be competing with Rutgers, Princeton with Princeton, NJIT with NJIT. Please see the RFA for details. If collaborating across NJAX affiliates or other entities, a separate budget and sign-off will be required by both institutions. So we do need to be aware that if you are doing a collaboration and sharing the funds as a subcontract, these do need to meet the requirements, the regulatory requirements of the respective institutions. Next slide. When will I hear and how soon? Well, the award notification will be February. Again, the deadline for the full application, December 13th. You will be notified early in February. The actual start date release of funds will depend on some regulatory components like human subjects IRB and IACUC. Foreign components cannot be utilized. No foreign components or institutions will be supported. The anticipated start date would be March of 2025. So, deadlines. Letter of intent coming up in a week or so. Full application mid-December. Award notification will be February with a start of March. Next slide. How long's the project? Project period's 12 months. Are no-cost extension allowed? Yes, one no-cost extension for a year. Justification is required. Next slide. Where do we go for help? Well, does my project fit the RFA? Pilot co-leads could be notified. I showed that photo. Sam Wong, Grace Wong, Arnold Rabson, and Joe Yeager. Identify potential co-Is. RFA contains a helpful list. And budget subcontracts and INCAT's approval will follow. You just simply email us and we'll get back to that. Next slide. All right, let's take the slides down and happy to answer any questions. Sandy Burrows, Pam Dalen, and colleagues I mentioned on the administrative crowd are happy to help you in this process. These slides will be put up on our website. Bill, maybe you could tell us where they can be located. They should be clearly found, and they will be posted on our website with all the detail.
I'll put a link in the chat for everybody.
Great. All right. So let's take some of the questions in the chat. I'll read them in order. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I see the RFA mentioning translational research, not science. So would this be a translational? No, this is all translational research. Our translational science competition has already been held and grants awarded. This is translational and clinical research. The slides, as I mentioned, will be posted. We'll send the link around shortly. No INCAT's approvals necessary for the CTR pilot program, just to be aware of that. We do not need to go through our institution. These monies are coming right from the institutions and supporting investigation within the institution. Could I add a co-I after the letter of intent? I think that that's certainly feasible if that co-I is playing a key role in the accomplishment of it. Obviously, in order to get through the threshold of a letter of intent, the science has to be intriguing, it has to be aligned. Once you get the full application, I think you could easily add co-Is if you feel there's an expertise you need. That could be added later. We'd like to know the PIs at the time of the LOI, mostly because we have to start to line up reviewers. And we try to decrease conflicts of interests if there's a number of co-Is. Is there a place where we can find a list of previous awardees for translational research? That's a good question. Sandy, Pam?
They are all available on the NJX website under funding opportunities, NJX pilots. They're all listed there.
There you go. I knew they would have the right answer. You see, Sandy just sent you the link for investigator resources. And Mila has also sent the link. Do I need to specify the use of NJAX resources in the LOI? It would not hurt, Ronnie, if you did that. I think it would be, it's not necessary, nor are you compelled. But the sense is that NJAX supplies infrastructure. If we read the LOI and we get a sense that you're leveraging the infrastructure, then that's really one of the central goals of NJAX. So I would think it would be viewed favorably, but it's not necessary. Other questions? How much overlap can there be between an application and a future R21? Well, you know, this is a 1 year. This is a 1 year application. So obviously, if you have, and we'll see on your current your current support, an application that looks very similar to this, then obviously there could be scientific or budgetary overlap. So we're interested in funding new science, new research rather, new translational research. If it's an expansion of an R21, then you need to justify that as clearly this is different. It's an expansion. Maybe it's going into a different disease state. So I think it is important that that you do describe it. We're not interested in funding work that's already been funded.
So I was asking about a future R22, not, it has not been funded yet.
Well, yeah, by the time you got your R21, this grant would have ended since
Yeah.
it's only a 1 year and maybe a no cost extension. So, I mean, if there is an overlap, I'd be a little surprised, right? Because if you submit an R21, by the time you hear, it's going to be probably 6 to 8 months before you know your R21's funded. You probably would have exhausted, unless you're submitting this while you have one already submitted. If that's the case, then you need to declare that and describe how you're going to remedy any conflict or overlap.
Thank you.
If we include industry partnerships as part of collaboration, COI apart from their time, is it required to partner, provide other services? I'm asking based on the language. Yeah, you know, we're interested in in-kind support. So for example, if you're working with an industry colleague who's going to do single cell RNA-seq or spatial-seq analyses, which is quite costly, probably would burn up all of the 100K that you wanted to do. If they can clearly describe their in-kind, their in-kind support of your project, that would be certainly viewed positively. Ben, did that answer the question?
It did, yes. Thank you.
Okay, good. If you do have any further questions, again, you can reach out to me or to Arnold, Grace, or Sam at your respective institutions. I'm sure they'd be happy to help. Our goals here are for you to be successful. And we want this to be an endeavor that allows you to consolidate and crystallize your ideas that'll springboard into other NIH applications. If the proposed work involves patients, should I identify the collaborator? Yes, I think that would be very important, especially if you're getting samples from disease state patients. How are you going to deal with that? Remember, this is a 12-month project. So unless these samples are already procured and accessible in a biorepository, it's going to be very hard for you to recruit and test in 12 months the work. So I think it is important for you to make a compelling argument that it can be done. The slides and the video will be up on the on our website, as we mentioned already, so no worries there. Could we elaborate a little more on the criteria of the use? So NJAX has many elements and modules. For example, we have a core in biostatistics, epidemiology, research design. We have a core of regulatory. We have a core on informatics. If you go to NJAX, you'll see a list of all our cores and activities and resources. You can choose those resources that you feel are most aligned. We have a biomarkers core that's headed up by Dr. Gennaro at NJMS, very effective. You'd be able to click on that and see if her assays could be used to leverage again for your own study. So we have about 13 cores that are there. The informatics, community participatory organizations and engagement studies, a number of studies that you could find quite useful in your research. And stating that in your LOI would be very effective. You know, I would weave it into the narrative so that it's not simply a list. You know, we're going to, this science is going to use 5 cores, but not give us detail. Much more compelling in your narrative if you could describe how the core is going to help you. That would be very, very helpful and insightful. Other questions? Again, I really suggest if there's any doubt, questions, we want you to be successful. Please reach out to any of the co-leads that you'll see there. Type an email out to them or to me, and we will happily answer all your questions. Letter of intent. The letter of intent is coming up very, very quickly. But recognize it's a very short letter of intent. It's about 1.5 pages. Getting it in is necessary. Only those who submitted LOIs will be invited for a full application. You'll be notified either way if you do or don't get chosen. So we don't want you to be hanging out there. Judy, Sandy, colleagues, what did I miss?
Think you're good. If there's any questions, again, please you can also just email us at the njAX@rbhs.rutgers.edu. Email, we respond, we check that every day, multiple times. Also, I put in the link again for the pilot deadline and the link to the LOI. So everybody has that as well.
Yeah, so Jill asked, what percentage of applications are asked to submit a full application? What percent of LOIs, I guess, submit? You know, it's hard to tell, Jill. Sometimes the majority of them were asked in the past, maybe 75%, sometimes 50%. If you follow the guidelines, you know, our goals here are not to limit the number that'll be invited. It's a short application, and it should be used as an opportunity and a platform for you to submit R21s and so forth. So our goal, we don't have a defined percentage. If everybody is highly competitive, then so be it, and we will, you'll be invited. Typically awarded applications. In the past, we had as many as 30%. Since we split this into translational science and translational research, we have $100,000 to spend. So depending on how many people, per institution, by the way. So 100,000 from Rutgers, 100,000 from Princeton. It really depends on how many competitive applications we get to determine how many will be awarded. I can assure you one thing, if you don't apply, you're not going to get funded. So, you know, that's about the best I can offer at this point. This will be a recurring opportunity every year. And again, we're optimistic that we will have other institutions that are going to provide support, maybe in not this iteration this year, but down the road for sure.
Last
and-
question from me. I just wanted to know if there was anyone we could talk to about our research idea prior to letter of intent submission.
Sure, Jill, are you Rutgers or are you Princeton?
I'm Rutgers.
Rutgers. Yeah, I would reach out to Arnold. If Arnold's unavailable, I know he was on an extended vacation. He should be back. But Arnold Rapson would be the contact person. If you are unable to reach Arnold, then I'll be happy to answer your question. But I would first go to Arnold.
Dr. Rapson isn't back until after the 31st, Dr. Panettiere.
Oh, all right. Well, maybe if you work through my office, we'll find a time where we can chat, Jill.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I know we had up to 38 people. We're excited about this opportunity. We look forward to your letters of intent and queries, as well as applications pushing forward the mission of NJX. So with that, thank you so much, everyone. This video will be available to you. And again, hard to tell how many awards we're planning to fund at this point, depending, if we had 50,000, 50,000s, that would be 2 per institution. So that would be 5 in total. So thank you so much.